get started?
My name is Leroy, which I hate, so I go by Roy Stoerh, S-T-O-E-H-R.
All right. So we'll start off. What was Burlington like during the Depression and pre-war period?
During the Depression and pre-war period, let's see, I would say we as a family did not feel it too well. My dad had a job and he had an income coming in every week, and however, there was a lot of people on with food stamps. We had food stamps, and then we had what they called the WPA. It was some sort of a workman's situation where they were helped out by the government. But Burlington in itself was fairly capable of holding its own, because I think we were basically manufacturing. And it was pre-war, people were starting to feel, manufacturers, already the preparation to some degree. So that's about it.
Okay. So what were you doing at the time, work-wise or schooling, before you were drafted into the Army?
I got out of high school in 1940, and I worked for a plumbing brass firm for 1941 and 42, and then I went and was drafted in March of 43. However, I must say that I didn't stay drafted. I joined the Marines.
So can you go over that story on how you were drafted in the Army but then enlisted into the Marine Corps?
Sure. Briefly, I'll give it to you. It was a fellow by the name of Beanie Weber and I were drafted. I got the draft card in there somewhere. And in March of 1943. And we were shipped into, we lived in Burlington here, of course, and shipped into Milwaukee, where there was other draftees were in there for physicals to get in the Army. Well, as we got through the physical for the Army, and the group from Navy, from Great Lakes came in, and they had to get a certain quota for that day also out of that draft contingency. So we thought, you know, we'll probably be boot training and that at Great Lakes, and that's close to Burlington. So let's try to get in the Navy. So we got in the Navy. We got in there. The quota was filled, and then the Marines come in, and they needed a quota out of that group also. Well, it was snowing, and this was March. It was snowing and raining and everything. And Beanie, my buddy, said, God, look at that weather out there. Let's try to get in the Marines, because the sergeant said we leave for San Diego, and the weather was so beautiful there. So we passed the physical for that, and I can't remember if we left that night. It seems to me we were allowed to go home to say goodbye to our parents, or we left. I think we left and had to come back the next day, and we took Pullman cars out to San Diego.
How did you feel when you got the draft notice, or how did your family feel?
Well, I tell you, everybody, all the young fellows were getting their notices, and it was a very patriotic time, because we were in war with Germany over in European theater. However, we got a sneak attack and bombed by the Japanese at Pearl Harbor. And most of the young fellas, yes, we had a few that were what we call conscientious objectors. They didn't believe in war, which is their prerogative. But most of the young fellas were ready to go. They were gung-ho, ready to go. And the civilians, the people, women went to work in defense plants. They were, first time they put on aprons and went to work side by side with men in plants. And there were so many defense plants starting at that time. And it was just a different era. Oh, but we did, and they accepted rationing very well. Gasoline, my dad got 4 gallons a week, because he was, can you imagine where you go with that today? He was not in his type of, he could walk to work. Now you could get I was Class A, then you could get a Class B, you could get more gas. Then a Class C, you could get everything. But they rationed meat. The ladies were upset a little bit because they couldn't get silk stockings. Sugar was rationed. Many items were rationed. People put up with it, and they were glad to pitch in where they could because, like I said, they were very sore about the fact that it was a sneak attack and we lost all those men. For instance, 1,200 went down with the, I think it was the Arizona battleship out there. And it was, people were just wonderful about it. They accepted it very well.
So would you say that in the decision to enlist with the Marine Corps was purely based off the weather, or did you know that in the Marines you'd be facing off against the Japanese who felt, so you wanted to go to the Pacific over here?
That and how I put it, Semper Fidelis, always faithful. We had another slogan for it, but I won't give you that.
And then what was basic training like, Elver?
Well, I tell you, for a young kid, 19, 20, coming out of a soft life and getting into that was not easy. We got off I can't remember, it was 76 years ago. If it was at a bus or a train that we took from Los Angeles down to the Marine Corps base in San Diego. And our first impression of the base was, we got off the bus or train, whatever it was, and this big sergeant major standing there, and he looked at the bunch of us and he says, "You guys ain't even human beings." And my buddy said to me, "What the hell did we get into?" But the training was rough for someone that wasn't equipped for it, ready for it.
So you went through basic with your buddy from here, Beanie Weber?
Yes.
Do you have any stories?
Platoon 299, yes. Well, let's see. In the platoon, we did everything. We went on the rifle range later. That's when I got the sharpshooter medal. But in boot training, you never knew what was coming up. Sometimes it was a surprise thing. One time they woke us at midnight. We had to take a hike with a full pack. And we were in San Diego, and there was a mountain range in there at camp at the base. And so you just never knew. It was one of those things. Okay, we were trained to debark a ship, not by the rope net, but by jumping overboard. And you were trained one hand here to protect this, and one your groin area, and to leap off the ship. That's how you did it. And boy, they had a tank there that when I went off, I hit the bottom. It was deep, and all that. And there's one thing about it. They treated you. Your food was still great during boots, but they treated you very rough. However, once you graduated, those drill instructors that we had, and people that instructors, would come over and they were buddy. It was part of the training. How was it saying all over the camp? I'll think of it as we go on here. It was typical of them. Kill before you get killed. Was the way you had a rifle. The rifle was issued to you, the M1, and that rifle stayed with me, I believe, until the day I was discharged. And you better remember the rifle number, because if they during inspection, you'd give you port arms, order arms and all that, but you better know your rifle number, and you better know how to clean it and disassemble it and all that. That was your buddy. That was your best girlfriend, they tell you.
So speaking of the weapons, you had mentioned that you had qualified on a couple different types of weapons. Did you feel like, had you done much shooting before? Did you feel like you were good at it, qualified? Did you feel well trained after basic?
I'd say average, yeah. I mean, there's typically they taught you how to be careful with it also. I can remember one time when the first week or two we were firing without ammunition. They had a word for it. You squeeze the trigger right. You don't yank the trigger. You squeeze it softly so you don't pull it off a target. You know your windage, elevation, how to set it. one time when we got real bullets, ammunition, how did this fella, he got up, he was, on the rifle range we did this prone position, kneeling position, and standing. Prone was on your belly, like that. And we were done, and he got up and he come around with his rifle like this, and he had it pointed right at we all had an instructor. That instructor socked him, and he'll never forget it. You never do that. You never pointed that rifle at somebody like that in your group, you know. But it was one of those things, again, from the Marines.
Yeah. So after basic, what was it like when you got deployed to the Pacific?
After basic, I went to Camp Pendleton. And they put me in a photographic section, and I never carried a camera in my life, which was typical of what you get. Sometimes they put you where they needed you at the time. However, I was there for a while, and they made training films. That wasn't for me or anything like that. So then I joined the, let's see, I got to think a little here. My homework wasn't too good. After Camp Pendleton, where did we go? Okay, we got word to go to another base. I think it was a Navy base, air base, and we were there doing guard duty for a while, our group of mine. What the big thing was when we went to, after that they caught up with us and told us we were going to be set for going overseas. And naturally you didn't know where you were going or what you were going to do. So what we did, we went through more training at that, at that time. And when we got to, where did we go? Back to San Diego, I believe, and got our sea bags ready. We had sea bags. And we all got a bucket. You put the bucket on the bottom of the sea bag, and you had a brush. That was how you did your clothes, with the bucket and the brush. And then they'd have big tables like that. You'd do your clothes like that. And then we got aboard I don't remember, the SS Azalea City was the name of the ship. SS Azalea City. And we went over at that time, we sailed. We stopped in Hawaii, but we couldn't get off because we had some sort of shots or something that we couldn't. Then we went from there to, I think, right to Saipan and Guam. And we disembarked at Saipan, and I was there. What we were doing was preparatory for the invasion of Okinawa. So we were on Saipan, which is already won over. We had got it. We did very rough place, rough battle, because we'd take hikes, and the Japs hid in caves, and we went in with fire guns. What did they call them yet? They shot flamethrowers, and that's what Marines would go in with and get them out of there. And it's not very nice to talk about, but it was war. It was war. We were bombed. We were men killed, defenseless. So anyway, let's ought to get a few Marines to join that. Anyway.
So did the weather pan out the way that you thought it would once when you got to the Pacific?
Weather was okay on Saipan. Rain, in Guam too, quite a little rain, and everything is kind of bleached out. We were there for more training, basic hikes, and wanted to get you in shape. Interesting thing, a lot of the big heavy-set guys on these hikes couldn't finish sometimes. Their feet would hurt, or they just got in a mess. And the little scrawny guys, they kept going right on through. But we were on Saipan for a long time. I think I got it marked in there, at least 8-9 months training. And then we got ready for Okinawa. And Okinawa, that was Easter Sunday morning, April 1st, April Fool's Day, 1945. That's when we went ashore there. And the morning before we got off the ship, I think we got off with a rope net and our packs, and our sea bags come later, and were dumped out on the beach. Let's see, how did we do that, Jen? We went ashore what we did before we went ashore, there was a chaplain aboard, and all the Catholic boys could go to confession and communion if they wanted to. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. And so that was pretty well filled up with fellas. And then we went ashore. Now, I did not go ashore. I stayed aboard ship, and because I was with headquarters. And I was an expert typist in those days. They thought anybody could type what they called them a stenographer. And I knew shorthand. And we had some murders by some Navajo Indians. We had Navajo Indians in our outfit because they used their language to talk, to tell things when they got ashore, and the Japs could not understand that. They could, what's the word I want to use for when you want to anticipate somebody else's language? Anyway, they used them for that reason. Well, they got in the slop chute. Slop chute was our tavern at the beer place at the camp, and they got a little roiled up one night, and one shot another one. They carried that case aboard ship and it wasn't finished yet when we went ashore. So I got in later. I guarded freshwater supply, which was, I have a picture of that, and that I can't find. They had big tanks on the beach because the Japs were poisoning the water. And so that was a case where I did get a little bit ashore, but I got a star for the battle. I was there. One other thing, our ship, this was not the SS Australia City, that we went over to Saipan on, but the ship that I was on in the beach at Okinawa, we took on the survivors from a ship down maybe 200 yards down the ocean that was bombed by the Japs at that time. I said, we did take on those survivors, so I helped on that a lot. So anyway, and then I was, let's see, after that, then one day we get a notice, it's your group, your headquarters group, and I'm jumping around, excuse me. We had dropped the bomb on Nagasaki and now they call it Hiroshima. In those days they called it Hiroshima. And they said, you are joining the 1st Marine Division, that's the patch on my arm there, to go to Tientsin, China. And that was the greatest experience of my life, I think, because there I got into everything. And your job is to accept the formal surrender of the Japanese forces there. And there were a lot of Japanese there, dressed beautiful. Well, they didn't have combat. They were there for occupation. Like we went in to occupy it and see that they got on ships and got back to Tokyo. And so anyway, that was, to be in China like that was just great. To get to know the people, and like I think I mentioned before, when we left there, Max German, my buddy from Appleton, and I were standing on the front of the ship, backing out of, and see, we're right across from Korea. You know, the Yellow Sea. We went up to get the tents, and it's on that map I have there. They said, "Here lies a sleeping giant," and look at what it is today. They could make something out of nothing, but they didn't. They couldn't fight the Japs. The Japs were too strong for them. And anyway, we landed there and got off the ship, went ashore on pontoon boats and got on trucks. And as we drove through the city to where we were billeted, the people stood on the side of the road. They hated the Japs, and they cheered and they clapped. It made us feel good. And we still had our rifles with us because we didn't know what we were going to run into. We didn't know, but the people was that way. They didn't have an army. That's before the communists got in there. Chiang Kai-shek, I believe, was the ruler at that time, and he. Those were the nationals, as I recall. However, as we left or out of there, the communists were coming in already. We could see them in packs on horses coming in, dressed in different colored garb than we wore, the Japs or the Chinese wore. So there's many. China was just so different, and they treated us so greatly. It was just wonderful.
All right, so circling back to your time on Saipan and Guam, were you aware that you were training specifically for the invasion of Okinawa?
No, that was not, our outfit wasn't. We had no idea. We were there. In fact, we didn't know why we were there. We would ask that many times. Why did they put us here? The island has been secured, is the word I want to use, all secured, and what are we here for? But we kind of, as time went on, we kind of was suspicious that there was something. We thought maybe Tokyo, and we were glad it wasn't Tokyo because we talked to, there was another group, another outfit of the Marines that were sent to the Japanese mainland, which was Tokyo, and they said we would have lost thousands of men. They had barbed wire all along the coastline. Every man, woman, child had some sort of a weapon. And we would have, if we'd have done it by air, maybe we would have done it, but who am I to say, you know?
So while you were stationed in Saipan, Guam, and then China, did you get news about the war in Europe?
Oh, yes. Yes. And when Roosevelt died, let's see, the war in Europe, I've got a date on that too, when that was over. I think I gave that once before, maybe not. But anyway, yes, we knew immediately. Communication was wonderful that we got. And when, like I say, when Roosevelt died and they said that Truman was going to be president, we said, well, who the heck is Truman? None of us knew the vice president at the time.
So when you heard about that the war in Europe had ended, was there any celebration? Were you given time to celebrate?
Let me think where I was.
The war ended May 8, 1945.
1945. I would have been, I think, yet on Saipan. No, just there wasn't anything, we didn't have anything to drink or anything like that. So we didn't, no special, just probably glad, thank God that that's part's over. Because they didn't give us all the supplies and what we needed until that war was over. That was their plan, which was a good plan. And once that was over with, they could concentrate more, the government, on giving our people more supplies. Saipan was a B-29 base, and the thrill of that was, I'll tell you, was when they went to bomb Japan. They'd leave at night, and these beautiful B-29s, and the airport was there, and we'd just watch them go. And then when we could hear them when they come back, and try to count to see how many there were, coming back. Yeah, that was a beautiful plane. So anyway, let's see, where are we now in China yet?
Well, while you were on Saipan and Guam, were you still with Beanie Weber at the time? Or
Beanie, he was killed on Tarawa. So no, I was no longer with Beanie.
So
he got in the 4th Marine Division. They went to, I think it was Tarawa, and he got it over there, yeah.
And then you had mentioned that you had a buddy from Appleton.
Yeah, Max Garriman.
Was he with you through?
He was with us through, let me think, he went all the way through China with us. He was a truck driver. He was with Motor Transport. And he's deceased now, but he was motor transport. They were all truck drivers. Yeah.
Did you find it helpful having people that kind of came from the same area that you?
Yeah, you'd talk about like the fellows that come from New York. We had very little in common with them. It was nice, yes, to find a Wisconsinite. We'd get together always, and being in the same. We had a lot to talk about the baseball, football, Packers, and all that. You know, we had a lot in common. Mm-hmm.
So, do you have any stories specifically about what happened on Okinawa with? You said you were mentioned that you were defending water.
Yeah, no, not too much, because I was aboard ship a lot of the time, right there in the harbor, and they were waiting if they needed us, which we didn't. They didn't need us at that time, and we were there until it was all over with. They had surrendered, and that before we headed back to the States. Yeah, the stories, I think, I had pretty much routine after boot camp and that. There were times that I felt that I had one furlough during that I come back here to Burlington, and sat up all the way in the train, trying to think what it was, Western Pacific but anyway, boy did we need showers when we got here.
So when you came back here to Burlington during that leave, what was the kind of atmosphere here like?
Oh, they treated you so great, you know. We had prayed, and well, everybody was in, no pun intended, but the same boat. Mm-hmm. I mean, those people that stayed home here, they bought war bonds. They were getting used to the rationing. They were glad that they weren't the age that they had to go through the draft and a few things like that. And it was, you wore the uniform about one day, and then they took it off and wanted to get in our civilian clothes. And went back to my old job at that time. And then I became and got in sales and became a sales manager, and I had high school education. That's all I had.
So while you were in China, you were mentioning that you got out of the barracks and had a little bit of freedom. So
oh yeah.
What are some stories?
Oh golly, China, that was you could dance in the afternoon. They had people but they play White Christmas over and over and over. That was the funniest thing. Went to a nice restaurant, Kissling and Bader, a German restaurant. You could get steaks and that, and all of that. And however, I went in at $21 a month, and we didn't make much money while we were in. I'm trying to think of, and all our transportation was in rickshaws. And some were pulled this way, where the fellow would pull it, and others were on a bike. They'd pedal it, they had a rickshaw behind it. And rate of exchange at that time, they had people that would change Japs on the street corners, and I think it was, for every dollar, we got about 30 or 40 of their dollars, and you could go out and get a steak for $30, $40, and that would have been about $1, see. And then, what was the other thing that was so, we could hire, not rent, a room boy. And my name was Shi Fang La or something like that. And they would shine your shoes, they would press your uniform, clean it, take it to the cleaners for you, and get you a rickshaw if there wasn't one handy. And I think it was 2 of us could have one for $4 a month. And so that eased the pain quite a little. And I had my job there was with headquarters yet. We were busy, but we had free time also. They were kind that way. But it was run very well, the whole period. The transition back to a civilian was very easy, believe me.
So during your whole time did any of your opinions about the Japanese or the Chinese change? Any opinions that you had going into the military change by the time you came out?
I'll tell you one story. My wife and I, on our 35th wedding anniversary, went to Hawaii. And naturally, I wanted to go out and see the sunken. They built a memorial around the Arizona, and like I say, I think there's 1,200. What I've read and heard, and we heard at the time, entombed in there. Never brought them up. And on this memorial, there were a lot of Japanese, younger ones, a younger generation, snapping pictures. You know, they're camera hounds all over this place. I resented that. I really did. And I told Joyce, I think I'm going to push one or two in the water. But I was just BSing on that. That's the only thing. Other than that, I met one that I liked real well through business one time. And but that got to me a little bit. If it wouldn't have been the memorial there, and why are they so proud of it? They had to take a picture. See, we defeated them.
So with the dropping of the atomic bombs, you had mentioned that people said that if there had been an invasion, that there would have been thousands dead. So did you agree with the decision to drop the atomic bombs?
If they'd have dropped the atomic bomb, I don't know. That would have taken too many civilian lives. So I don't know about that. One thing, a fella in uniform, he knows he might not come home and that when he goes in and all that. But civilian lives, I don't know. I'd have mixed feelings on that.
When you had first gotten the papers and the news that a bomb of such a great magnitude had been dropped, what were kind of some of the opinions of the
yeah, what area? Are you talking about Nagasaki, or or over in
the atomic bombs?
The atomic bomb. Yeah. It hastened the end of the war. That was one thing. I don't know. Again, I hate. It's tough for me to, at my age now, I guess, to think that clearly. I don't know. When I heard the terrible things that were done, both in Europe and in Poland, in Europe, and in what was that terrible march in the Pacific?
Baton.
Yeah, and how I had a friend from Burlington here died on that march. His name was Roy Anderson. There maybe I felt that let's stop this thing, but if we could have got the women and the children out of the way and just got the army, the military. I think that's the way I feel about it. It's hard for me to explain.
Yeah. Was there any time when you were nervous or scared about what was happening and what was going on?
Probably the morning aboard ship before we went ashore at Okinawa, and the idea that they had a chaplain there and everything else. And I didn't know I was going to be in, I didn't know what I had my rifle. When you were in the Marines, everybody was trained for the infantry. So they could put you in any time. You knew how to handle that rifle, you knew how to throw a hand grenade and all that. But that was the only time I had second thoughts, I think. Going home from there to the States, it was the longest trip I've ever taken anywhere. And there's a song, Slow Boat to China. I don't know, you fellows are too young maybe to know that song. It should have been called There's a Slow Boat from China Home. But that's the only time. I think you're around your buddies. It's amazing how close you get to your buddies, the friends. And we're all together, we're in this together, and you have that feeling. And we had several chaplains always there that would try to give you strength, spiritual strength if you needed it. I didn't think I needed it at the time, but Well, that about covers how I felt at that time, I think. Mm-hmm.
So while you were defending the water supply, did the Japanese try to poison it while you were on guard?
No.
And then did you ever get injured or ill?
No, I got malaria. I had a case of malaria, which I got on Saipan. I'm sure I did. And we took Adabrin. And an officer stood there in the chow line, and you better take your Adabrin. And I turned yellow. My whites in my eyes turned yellow. I looked like a freak. But I got over it later. I was in a tent hospital for just a short time. That's all. Other than that, no, not a scratch other than that.
So while you were in China occupying, and you had mentioned that the officers accepted the formal surrender, but
there'll be pictures in that of them doing that. Excuse me for interrupting.
No, you're fine. What was kind of the atmosphere like when the Japanese surrendered in China?
The atmosphere of the Chinese, where they were celebrating, because they weren't treated nicely and like I said, they cheered us so when we come ashore. And the atmosphere, and we had certain work details made up of Japanese. And a little PFC or so would be in charge of them, and they had a much higher rank, the equivalent, I'm sure of that. They resented that, but never anything where it would be dangerous or anything. They had no weapons or anything anymore. And some of they loved to carry swords, the officers. And I never got anything like that. I never brought one to bring something like that home because I heard stories that they would confiscate it when you got in the States, or it would be confiscated when you were going to head home and you were delayed. I heard that. Whether it was true or not, I don't know. But a lot of them did bring stuff home. I wish I would have. Now I could have, but I didn't. So. Anyway, so that ended that, I guess. But the attitude there of the Chinese was tremendous. They just loved us, and for being there, because they knew that they were going to be free. But then the communists come in, so you can't win for losing it sometimes. Mm-hmm.
So, what were kind of just the general opinion of the Japanese within the soldiers in the Marine Corps?
Of the Americans, you mean?
How do the Americans feel about the Japanese?
They were all bitter. I think the word is very bitter. I was driving in the Union Grove, you know where that is, in my 1935 Pontiac, when I heard the Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor. I thought, where in the devil is Pearl Harbor? I went home and I looked it up, and everybody, they were in shock, when that happened. It was a sneak attack. See, that's why the Marines resented that with no way at all. A little bit of humor on Semper Fidelis and Always Faithful. And when things didn't go right, they'd say, always faithful, heck. Hurry for me and hell with the other fella, which wasn't true. So anyway. So
a lot of people, the Japanese, fought tooth and nail, like you said, hiding in caves and stuff.
Yes,
like that.
they dug out. See, World War I was trenches, and this was caves, and with the Japanese anyway, and we'd find bones in there yet. And it was just a terrible thing, I know, but they hide in there and fire their weapons from in there, and it was protective for them. And for an infantryman marching like he's open in wide open spaces, and they'd be in these caves firing, and so they just went with these flamethrowers. I never saw a flamethrower, but I heard about them, and I saw the results of them, what happened when they used them.
Did you or other Marines feel resentment towards that kind of fighting style of hijacking in the cave?
Not at the time. Not at the time. Definitely not.
So what was it like when Japan finally surrendered? What was kind of the feeling amongst the soldiers?
Oh, it was, boy, I get home now to my wife or girlfriend or, they offered us $1,000 to ship over at the end of the war in the Marines. And I didn't want it, I wanted to get home. I mean, that's the attitude. You missed your family and I wasn't married or anything, but your mother and dad and sister and things like that, I just wanted to go. There's still quite a few of them shipped over. They probably didn't have something to go home to that they liked service life, Marine life. It was good. In peacetime, it was a good life. And, but the attitude in most of them was, let's go home, that I saw, rather than re-enlist.
So at any time did you feel like the Marine Corps was the wrong choice and you should have stuck with the Army, or were you always proud to be a Marine?
By the grace of God and a few Marines, MacArthur returned to the Philippines. That sums it up.
So speaking of that and just kind of leadership, did you have any junior officers that were directly overseeing you? Any stories about?
Oh, you hear stories about them. Not dry behind the ears was one, and things like that. But no, our officers, they had a job to do. They had command. They had to keep law and order. They had sometimes a tough job to do, and I respected them all. I really did. Yeah, I saluted boy when I saw one. I really did, and most of them were. I've heard stories about just in the Army, but I can't say anything about the Marine officers.
So, what was the process coming home? How did that work?
I think I phoned home for some money or did they pay us? Yeah, they paid us so much a mile, I believe. That's kind of foggy now. I know I wound up back at Camp Pendleton at Oceanside, and I think I called from there and said, I'm here now and we're going to be home. I'm taking train number so-and-so, and I ought to be home at such a time. I come in at Milwaukee and took an electric car, I think it was, to Union Grove, and my dad picked me up there. And that's kind of vague, kind of foggy right now what happened. But I know I got some money somewhere to get the train fare home. But the process, no wait, I went to Great Lakes. I was processed at Great Lakes. That was it. Because the Navy owns the Marine Corps, they're over the Marines. And one little story, I met a Navy fellow. I had a shirt on at Miller Stadium, and I had a Marine insignia or something on. We walked out together, and I said to him, Navy's a pretty good outfit. Once in a while, they got us to where we wanted to go. And he said, and we also got you home. So I never used that again. Anyway, I'm probably repeating a lot of stuff we went over the other day, huh?
Well, now it's on camera, so that's
okay.
Good.
Yeah.
So when you came home, you had said that you married Joyce in 1947.
47.
So what was it like coming home and kind of that process and the?
It was. Well, I went back to my old job, and they were there with arms out for you. They received, incidentally, the Navy E award during the war because they made 75 millimeter projectiles for anti-aircraft. And in fact, they started to make them already when I was still there before I joined the Marines. Anyway, it was everybody, I can't even tell you that everybody accepted you so well and made you feel welcome to come home and didn't talk about the war. You know, it was a new life now. And you, see, I come home and I think I was 46. Married Joyce in 47. Been married 72 years. As old as that uniform is probably. And we, it was just a nice, everybody, you couldn't get a new car yet. You had to go on a list and wait. They got in production again. And that was probably the saddest thing. I picked up a 1940 Chevy that a guy traded in on a new Dodge, and I was lucky to get that. It was in good shape, good condition. So, but you had to get used. I think there were some that maybe indicated they were put out because they had to go and maybe somebody else didn't. But most of them didn't feel that way. Those that stayed home, they worked in defense plants. They helped the economy, helped win the war. So did your parents' jobs, did they shift to different positions during the war to help?
Yeah,
my mother did. She was upset that I had to go and would worry, and she would, not Dad. My dad was never in service. He was too old, I think, for World War I. I'm not too sure of that now. But my mother was worried always, you know. Still mother's boy. But she was so thrilled when it was over.
So you had mentioned that it was difficult to get a car.
Oh gosh, yes.
What's going on? But was it hard for you to find your job, or did they accept you back?
No, they were looking for help. Actually, they made a position for me. They made me assistant sales manager, and I had to learn a lot. Believe me, I didn't go to college, but I learned it there by a very, very good boss and owners of the company. We hired 120 men, and we sold nationally, and it didn't pay much, but anyway, it was no problem. Jobs were available. If you wanted to work, you could get a job.
Was there any difficulty finding housing with all the soldiers coming back?
No, I don't think so. I can't. We got married. We lived in a little 3-room flat upstairs till we could afford something better. But no, not particularly. You know, a lot of them would, if there was a problem, I know married couples would move in with either his family or her family until they could get on their feet. There's a lot. They treated us great, really.
So everyone talks about how the 50s was a big boom after the war and all that stuff. Do you have any fond memories of the 90s?
Of the 50s? Not particularly. I stayed on the same job until I was 65. So, no, not of the 50s. I don't have anything other than we had a boom. Where business was good in our company, and no, I really can't. It was just good times. Burlington was always a fairly prosperous town, manufacturing, and we had more manufacturing than a lot of towns with our population. Mm-hmm.
So then you had mentioned that as you were leaving China, you saw some of the communists coming in, taking power from the nationalists. How did you feel when you learned that China had fell to communists and the nationalists were out? Did you empathize with them?
Felt bad because they didn't look to me established as though they could go to communism as well as they could have followed maybe us, you know. Now, I always forget the name of the place. Where did Chiang Kai-shek go? What?
Taiwan.
Taiwan. I don't know why I can't remember that. Taiwan is the home of Foxconn, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe so. That is.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I I didn't like it. I felt bad about it. I don't know why. Because I wasn't in love with Russia, and I just felt, gee, I hope that it works out okay for them.
Did you, while you were there, you had mentioned that they had amazing work ethic and would, make anything out of nothing. So did you kind of see some of that? People say the American dream, that kind of drive. Did you see some of that in the Chinese? Some of that?
See what was that?
Like the American dream, and people always say that there's like a, the drive that Americans have.
Well, one day, kiddingly, somebody needed a broom, and we didn't have a broom. Well, maybe I told you this, but maybe not. But this Chinaman went up on a tree, and he got a long stick, and then he got a bunch of leaves and took some twine and thrust them on the end. He made a heck of a good broom. Just little things like, and the fellows that we hired for us, that we could pay $4 a month, and our room boy, as we call them, they could do anything. It just came natural to them.
Mm-hmm. So, kind of after the war, obviously in the early 50s, we were in a conflict in Korea. Did you know anyone from the Marine Corps that stayed in and ended up deploying to Korea?
Let me think. I don't. Yes. They'll be here with a firing squad on Memorial Day. He was in Korea. His name is Bob Bolden. He'll be here. He is gung-ho Marine, I'll tell you. There's a saying, once a Marine, always a Marine. I got to quit right talking about the Marine Corps.
That's what we're...
But there's I'd say 2 from Burlington that were in Korea, the Korean War. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever feel like you would wish that you had stayed in and
No.
gone?
No, I didn't. I made the best of it while I was in, and met such nice fellas and all that, but not for making not to stay in.
So, kind of jumping to the 60s, did you, the atmosphere with the Vietnam War was very different. You had mentioned that people with World War II were very patriotic, this is a duty as an American. Were you offended, or how did you feel about the resentment towards the Vietnam?
Not anything near like it was with Pearl Harbor. I'll say nothing like that. There was no rationing like that. So the feeling was not nearly as strong against it as World War II. And maybe the age differential made a difference too, I don't know. That would be just a different time. Yeah.
And then wrapping up here, now that World War II has ended over 70 years ago,
Yeah.
How do you feel like the conflict's the memory of the conflict is today? How do you feel it's remembered today?
As I would remember it today, as how the war was, everything appeared, I would say, looking back, I would say it was a necessity, both in Europe and both in Asia. And I look back and I say, these people ought to be happy that there was enough of us that presented ourselves, made ourselves available to become a part of America's Army and Navy, Marines, Air Force. I really do. And I always taught that to my kids, sort of. Not that it was a situation, not to brag, not that, but it was a necessity at the time. And we were there to do our job. And that's the way I look at it at 96 years of age.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Stoerh, for
Sure.
talking with us and sharing your story.
Well, I wish, like I said before, I wish I could have No, I don't wish I was in combat. I'll take it back. I did my job and let it go at that.
All right, well, thank you.
You bet. Thank you for doing this.